everybody, Dacob here. Welcome back to the Fashion Bunker. Today's a very special video. I will be talking to you about patchouli, and in particular, patchouli perfumes or fragrances that have patchouli in them. Actually, the conversation is going to be a bit more complex. Before we begin, I would like to thank my patrons for supporting the channel and helping out. Through Patreon, you can also help sustain the channel and get access to special videos that are only available there, plus all the videos that you can see here since a couple of months now. You could also watch over there on Patreon ad-free while they stay with ads on YouTube. Now, let's get straight to patchouli. Patchouli is a complicated smell. Let's not go into the plant yet, but just the smell. When I was a kid, I was confronted with patchouli a lot, whether it be through smells surrounding me or plants. Well, mostly the smells, but smells through different sources. What does this mean? This means actually through perfume, through, believe it or not, even toilet paper, soaps, oils, kitchen, like cooking, repellents, bug repellents, and toys. We're going to get to all of that in a minute. Actually, we're going to begin straight off talking about what patchouli is. Now, oh boy, this is a huge conversation. Let's just say, when I was growing up, and I think in every generation, when kids hit puberty in school, they go through a rebellious phase, more or less. And that rebellious phase, for my generation, was definitely listening to The Doors, Nirvana, rediscovering the whole hippie movement. I had a lot of friends of mine from school that were into, joints and smelling of really cheap patchouli oil. There's a synthetic version of the patchouli oil. There's a natural version of the patchouli oil. And I think most of you know how bad synthetic patchouli can smell, or how a cheap patchouli oil can smell. And I've associated most of my youth basically to this kind of bad clothes and cheap smelling patchouli oil in combination with being rebellious for the sake of being rebellious without really knowing how to fight to make the world a better place. It was kind of like more of a fashion rather than a real movement. Granted, late 60s, or mid 60s, late 60s, the hippie movement was a political movement per se. There was reasons behind it, but every generation after that, I think, would be fascinated by that movement and would just appropriate it out of fashion reasons. And hence, the connotation of patchouli as that cheap smelling oil, in my mind, it kind of sedimentated itself or fossilized itself or enshrined itself in my memory as a no-go. Everything that smelled patchouli-like to me was associated with repellent. Like, I was repelled by it. Well, what is actually the patchouli plant? Now let's read a little bit together here. Patchouli, or the Pogostemon kablin, from Tamil Pakuli, is a species of plant from the family of Lamiaceae. I'm reading this in Latin. Commonly called the mint or dead nettle family. The plant grows as a bushy herb with erect stems reaching around 75 centimeters or 2.5 feet in height and bearing small pale pink-white flowers. It is native to tropical regions of Asia and is now extensively cultivated in China, Indonesia, Japan, Cambodia, Myanmar, India, Maldives, Malaysia, Mauritius, Seychelles, Madagascar, Taiwan, Pakistan, Philippines, Thailand, Vietnam, South America, and the Caribbean. So it is all over the place, but the plant needs warmth. It also needs humidity. What is interesting to note, that the scent of patchouli has been used for centuries, way before the hippie movement, in perfumes, incense, insect repellents, and alternative medicines. The word derives from the Tamil pachai, green, elai, Tamil, leaf, and in Assamese it is known as, this is hard to pronounce, Xukloti. Forgive me for butchering the word. And in Canada, it is known as Pachethain. Now, of course, I probably butchered that name as well. But what is interesting to note, patchouli grows well in warm or tropical climates. It thrives in hot weather, but not direct sunlight. If the plant withers due to lack of water, it will recover well and quickly after rain or watering. So this little plant, you know, it's not delicate. It goes through hell and it just keeps on living. The seed-producing flowers are very fragrant and blossom in late fall. Hence, now in early winter is the time to smell it, because if we have harvested it in late fall, early winter is when we get the products, perfumes and such. So it's the best time to make this video now. The tiny seeds may be harvested for planting, but they are very delicate and easily crushed. Cutting from the mother plant can also be rooted in water to produce additional plants. Extraction of patchouli's essential oil is a steam distillation of the dried leaves, requiring rupture of its cell walls by steam scalding, light fermentation, or drying. The main chemical component of patchouli oil is patchoulol, a sesquiterpene alcohol. That was hard to pronounce. Leaves may be harvested several times a year and, when dried, may be exported for distillation. Some sources say the highest quality oil is produced from fresh leaves, distilled close to where they are harvested. Others say that boiling the dried leaves and fermenting them for a period of time is best. So there are different strategies and different thoughts or schools of thought to what is good patchouli and what is cheaper patchouli. But as they say for the Parmigiano Reggiano, the Parma cheese, they always say the best quality Parmigiano Reggiano is in Parma and in the region. And with every kilometer you go further and further away from the center of Parma, the quality of the cheese diminishes. They send out to the world the lesser qualities. With patchouli, we could kind of, you know, they also say for wine, especially for red wine, it doesn't travel well. Drink it always as close as possible to the source where it was harvested, where it was made and produced. With perfumes, we have something similar happen to a lot of different brands, but we're not going to get into that now. That's a topic on its own. Let's get back to patchouli. So I mentioned toys before, right? Mattel in 1985 released a toy. Now, I have here, and it's a patchouli scented toy. The plastic was infused with patchouli oil, mixed and then molded into Stinkor. Now, I have not the 80s toy because it fell apart, but I have the 2000s edition. Now we're starting to understand why the background is not green as the patchouli plant, but more orangey, because I've associated usually this hue of color to patchouli smell in my life as I was growing up. This is, by the way, a Vivienne Westwood backdrop. It's a toga dress from the World's End line. Let me smell Stinkor. Okay, this is the classic patchouli smell. He smells very intensely of a plasticky kind of synthetic-y patchouli. I do have Stinkor. When Mattel re-released him in the Masters of the Universe Classics line, they made him bigger than his 80s counterpart, but they still made the plastic smell of patchouli, and this is the head he bears in the new cartoon, and this is his 80s counterpart head. This is the original Stinkor head from the 80s. Mattel does crazy stuff. They even have this little tiny screw that goes into his breathing mask, because the idea is that Stinkor, he wins, and he's evil, by the way, works for Skeletor. He wins the battles, or the way basically his main weapon is his stench. He has this mask that helps him be able to survive his own stench while all the enemies around him faint, collapse, or even perish. That's how stinky he is. So Mattel went that way, and I guess for kids, associating the smell of Stinkor with stench, but Stinkor being scented with patchouli, that might have played with my brains too, and might have made me think as well that patchouli is not a good scent. However, now that I have been thinking about patchouli, and that I've been working on this video, or the idea of this video, for quite some time now, I really went into researching, okay, well, which fragrances have patchouli? And what are my top fragrances for patchouli? Or the top 10, or just the top 5, or just my top, without a specific number in general, patchouli perfumes. And I thought, oh, well, it's just going to be 2 or 3. But then, of course, the more you dig into it and the more you realize that patchouli is much more common in perfumery than you think. Well, that's what I figured out. And as I mentioned before, yes, patchouli is also often used to scent toilet paper. Go figure. Oh, by the way, Mattel also made a pine-scented toy. This is Moss Man. This guy smells of pine, but there's a hint of patchouli in there as well, I would say. Also still flocked and pine-scented. So Mattel is, by the way, Masters of the Universe and She-Ra, favorite toy line ever. Okay, so let's begin. We're not going to go really chronologically, but a little bit chronological. Like the 2 fragrances that most of all shock for their patchouli presence. One is not too much of a shocker. The other one totally is. The first one being Opium, the pure perfume of Opium. Even in its modern day formulation, Opium in its mid to heart notes bears patchouli. Now, patchouli is also associated to incense. Of course, incense is a major game player in Opium, and so patchouli blends with it very well. You don't really smell out the patchouli in here. The original formulation of Opium is more about the incenses and the carnations. However, since we've noticed in the description that I made before, where does patchouli usually grow? Usually in warmer climates, in Asia, but also Orient. So we do consider fragrances that are quite heavy in patchouli to be Orientals. Or are they? Let's see. What is the first shocker? By the way, so Opium is a fragrance I love, and Opium bears within its DNA patchouli. So Dacob goes, okay, maybe I'm not, so anti-patchouli after all. This is a facet of patchouli. It's a way of rendering patchouli. Let's move on to the next. This is the shocker. Chanel No. 5, in all its iterations here, I have the pure perfume in its 7.5 milliliter spray refillable form, and the eau de parfum in 200 milliliter size in the eau de parfum concentration, but also the eau de cologne, which is discontinued, as well as the eau de toilette, all have patchouli at their core in the base notes. I never smell out patchouli here when I wear Chanel No. 5, but also because, well, you could check out the review of Chanel No. 5. I mean, I've done so many reviews, but also with the pure perfume. It started off with 187 ingredients, toned down to around 83. Now maybe it has even less, but nevertheless, the patchouli here does not dominate, but it's present, and it is part of the winning formulation of Chanel No. 5. So definitely a shocker to me, figuring out that patchouli is an essential component of Chanel No. 5. You start reconsidering what the scent is all about. Let's try to put these in the picture. This is going to be really difficult. You're going to see in a moment. Now I'm going to go to also a surprise, but these fragrances are very tough, are very strong. No. 5 is not considered an Oriental. So you see, patchouli doesn't always go into what is considered an Oriental fragrance. Second proof of that is going to be the third fragrance. I mean, this one is considered an Oriental, but let's see, what is the third fragrance that bears patchouli and is not an Oriental, but it's still an Yves Saint Laurent, and that is Rive Gauche pour Homme. The male version of Rive Gauche has patchouli in its base. Now, this is a very light version of a patchouli. It is the more watery connotation of patchouli because, mind you, the way that patchouli is described as a scent, it's different facets of woodsy, incensey. It could be humid, it could be wet, green, quite green and planty and oily and kind of moist, green, earthy, woodsy, resinousy, incensey smell, which we totally get in Opium, but not as much as it could go. We don't get it at all in Yves Saint Laurent Rive Gauche pour Homme. But the patchouli in here is what rounds it up, because if it wasn't for the patchouli in this fragrance, it wouldn't, because it would only be an airy, light, fresh, cloudy perfume. The patchouli does throw some sort of like kind of spikes towards it. It captures it in the air and it grounds it. It doesn't root Rive Gauche pour Homme, but it grounds it a little bit. It gives it a bit of heft. Works perfectly well. In fact, Yves Saint Laurent unfortunately discontinued in this bottle, but also in this particular formulation. It is one of my favorite renditions of Pour Homme Yves Saint Laurent fragrances out there. So this was also a surprise to realize that there is patchouli in here. But once you know patchouli is in there, you do start to smell it out. You start sniffing it out. It's just the way it is. Moving on, historically, well, this is a 20s fragrance, a 70s fragrance. This one is, oh gosh, was it late 90s and discontinued early 2000s, I would say more like it. Then we go to the 80s. ANTAEUS. Now, ANTAEUS is a heavy fragrance, so it doesn't really surprise if I say that ANTAEUS has patchouli in it. You could check out the review of this one in the card section up above or in the description box under this video. They only allow me 5 cards per video, so you're going to check out all of these links to all the perfumes that I have reviewed up to now in the description box down below, because it's going to be definitely more than 5, obviously. ANTAEUS, with its honey as well, shows us just exactly how much Jacques Polge, who was the perfumer of this fragrance, worked for Chanel back then, how much he was actually obsessed with patchouli. Never really mentioned that much as a symbol of Jacques Polge's work for Chanel, but the more I analyzed patchouli and the more I realized Jacques was obsessed with patchouli. This is a heavy, darker version of the bottle. The black bottle also tells us that it's kind of dark, but there's also a desert there with a flower growing in the middle of the desert. That flower could be a patchouli, but more details about that in the review video of ANTAEUS. Jacques Polge, you know, maybe this was the beginning of the research of his particular obsession with patchouli, and it was very heavy here. Then slightly watered down in his next rendition. Now, this is his son's concentration, the intense version of COCO Mademoiselle, but COCO Mademoiselle is a sweet patchouli. It's a very heavy patchouli that has a cotton candy type of caramelized vibe to it. This guy initiated the whole sweet patchouli movement in fragrance, which was nauseating and kept everybody, kept the masses wanting for more, but kept the perfume aficionados really angry about the fact that it was overdone. Now, this is Olivier's version, the son's version, but the pure perfume, here we have the 7.5 milliliter spray bottle, is Jacques' fragrance. The patchouli here is wonderful. It's masterful. Especially, I have to say, this one was released in the early 2000s after decades, right? We could only, you could say it's been almost 20 years now. It has aged very well, and I am loving it. Not so much in the eau de toilette and eau de parfum form, but really loving it in the pure perfume, as well as in the relatively newly released intense eau de parfum version. Now, the patchouli here is a new discovery of patchouli. It's very different from Jacques' ANTAEUS patchouli. It is a sweeter patchouli. There's no darkness in here. It can be cloying in the wrong weather and on the wrong skin type, and if you overdose it, but it nevertheless, in its dry down, it becomes more airy. This one doesn't. This was kind of like an experiment of the sweet patchouli, like where does sweet patchouli take us? And it was released right before this masterpiece here, Chance, also by Jacques Polge. This is the pure perfume, 7.5 milliliter splash bottle. It's as if, and I will be doing a review of this one soon, but I can tell you this already. This one was released after COCO Mademoiselle and is also patchouli heavy. And it feels as if Jacques with COCO Mademoiselle went to the sweet patchouli extremity, learned about it, understood it, and then tweaked it, fine-tuned the formula, and then released Chance. And in fact, Chance is a much more elegant version of COCO Mademoiselle. A lot of people say, oh, it is like COCO Mademoiselle. It's a different fragrance, and you understand his growth. You understand that he understood better how to work with patchouli, because the patchouli in Chance is a masterpiece. It's there, but it's not there. It's visible, it's invisible. It's really, really that good. It's a contrast of many, many things, and it's a great patchouli. Now we distance ourselves from Chanel for a minute, and another surprise to me, really. This one comes from the 90s, but I never envisioned it as a patchouli fragrance or patchouli-based fragrance. And I did promise this, and trust you me, a crazy review is coming up. But patience. Boudoir by Vivienne Westwood. 90s released fragrance. The first one, the original one. This one is all about the roses and the marigold, the tobacco, but also about the patchouli that's hiding in there. This is not a sweet chuli. This one was released way before the sweet chuli movement. This one is, because of the tobacco, I would say, and the marigold, it's a dirty patchouli. This one is more the sexualized context of patchouli. This one does not smell resinous or oily at all. On the contrary, this one is smoke. It clogs your neck and it makes you inhale as if your lungs were full of dust, and it's hard to keep breathing, and yet it's so intoxicating, and it envelops you and you want more. I mean, you can't say too much on this platform in particular, but let's say if it's as if you're how do we make this user friendly? If you're overindulging in certain activities that are very pleasant to the body, and you want to keep overindulging, but you can't because the body's just too irritated, can't go on, but you still go on, that's what this perfume is. Enough said about that. Wait for the review to come. But this is a wonderful way of rendering patchouli. Another surprise to me. Moving on from there, we get to Comme des Garcons Incense Series 3, not Incense Series 3, Series 3, but the Incense Avignon. There are 5 fragrances in this collection. Not all 5 have a patchouli. This one has the strongest kind of rendition of the patchouli, however, that's why it's in this list. It is a wonderful, masterful way of rendering patchouli in a way that it smells as an incense. Now, I've mentioned before that patchouli does have an incensey connotation in the description of how the scent or how the smell is. And this is the perfect example of how incensey a patchouli can be. That's why it's definitely in this list of best patchoulis ever. If we're going to go into how an artificial, completely synthetic patchouli can be, how can it be used in an innovative, in an innovational type of way, then we have to talk about Thierry Mugler, Amen. This one actually has 2 patchoulis listed. It has a patchouli in the heart as well as in the base notes. So this is a monster of a patchouli fragrance. It is that heavy, and it is that cloying, and it is also overly sweet. And I mean, of course, there are so many other ingredients in Amen, and people either love it or hate it. I love it, and I love to hate it. I have really a love-hate relationship with this one. I do respect it for what it is. When it was first released, it was a huge innovation in perfumery. However, today, we can still appreciate it. It hasn't aged perfectly well. It is very secluded to its time. Now, it has seen many iterations of itself. There are many flankers out there of Amen, so it keeps redefining itself and reinventing itself in a way, but we're just talking here about the original one. But still, nothing else out there like this one. And this one will become, or will remain forever, I think, as long as humanity exists, a staple of perfume history within the given context of, what was it, late 90s, I think mid-late 90s. Can't remember now if this was early 2000s, but I think it was in the 90s. So now, these fragrances here explain to you actually why I am, well, more or less, because I have finished now describing the non-obvious patchouli holders. I mean, well, except for the sweet chuli and maybe opium, the other ones are not as obvious. And in fact, the sweet chuli here is not really the patchouli. It's sweetened down. But anyway, what I want to say is these fragrances here have allowed me to unlock inside of me, first of all, to free myself from that pattern of thinking whatever smells of patchouli isn't good, because I've been conditioned growing up that way. First of all, and second of all, they have allowed me to recalibrate my senses and my sensitivity to patchouli allowing myself to appreciate it, even when it gets delivered to me in a more pure form. What does this mean? Well, you'll understand in a minute. So we're going to get to the next fragrance with patchouli, and that is 31 Rue CAMBON. Now this one is a big bottle. Can we put it up here maybe? Because there's like no more space. Upside down? No. So 31 Rue CAMBON is another masterpiece of a fragrance. It is an haute couture fragrance. It is a fragrance where the labdanum is enshrined within patchouli, and that's what makes it so beautiful. And it shows us, furthermore, Jacques Polge's, the ex-perfumer of Chanel, obsession with patchouli. He delivers to his haute couture creation of a Chanel fragrance, which haute couture in fashion is considered and deemed the highest level of fashion creativity. He defined 31 Rue CAMBON as an haute couture fragrance. So he put patchouli at the base of an haute couture fragrance. That just shows you how much he loved it, or still loves it, and how much his son Olivier follows that route. And why does he follow that route? We'll get to it in a minute. But so this one, had I not previously appreciated and loved all of these fragrances, I would have not fully understood the beauty of 31 Rue CAMBON. So you see where I'm getting at. I'm getting to the point where these higher dosed patchouli fragrances, now that I can understand them better and that I've freed myself from my preconceived notions of things in life, I can now appreciate them. With the British accent, I can appreciate them. I hate saying appreciate. I like the sh more than the s in the appreciation. Anyway, okay, now back to Yves Saint Laurent and its oriental lusting. Here we have a fingerprint magnet. You really can't see it. Noble leather. It's a reflection of the lights. Yves Saint Laurent's noble leather. It even has, and this is not a tester bottle, it's a fingerprint magnet. But you can see the accords are even on the purchase bottles. You can't really read it, can you? It has patchouli at the bottom. So this one is a leather, saffron, dried fruits, vanilla, and patchouli. Oh my gosh, is the patchouli in here. A synthetic oil, but a heavy oil. It is so oily. It's a cloying oil. This shows us that had I not appreciated and learned to appreciate the other ones prior to this one, I would have never understood the beauty of this one, because you have to love patchouli in a certain way to be able to appreciate noble leather. In fact, many people haven't appreciated it. Hence, this was one of the first out of this line of Yves Saint Laurent perfumes that has been discontinued. In fact, unfortunately, noble leather is no longer amongst us. So, can we put it in here somehow? Somehow we can. Nothing more to say about this one except check out the review and the link underneath this video in the description box. Now, moving on to Olivier Polge. Jacques Polge, but Olivier Polge pushing it to the next level. Coromandel. Chanel's pure perfume of Coromandel. Now, the eau de toilette was created by Jacques Polge, the father of Olivier Polge. The pure perfume of Coromandel just came out in 2019, late 2019, released by Olivier Polge. This is patchouli at its most noble level. Yes, that's what we can say. It is patchouli at its most noble level. It is a patchouli that it's pushed to such an extreme, with of course all the added other ingredients, including that white chocolate everybody always talks about, that makes it incredible. If you do not like white chocolate, that's fine, because a lot of people cannot smell the white chocolate out of here. I really love it. I think the white chocolate really tones down the patchouli in a way, but also elevates it. It's as if the patchouli were a bit more resinousy and oily in here, and the white chocolate gave it a creamy touch, not just an earthy tone. So yes, it's very earthy. Yes, it's very rooty. Yes, it's very woodsy and woody. But at the same time, Coromandel is also a lacquered feast for all of the senses. I mean, all the senses. Well, it's You know, you could smell it, you can't really taste it, but you can envision the taste of it. And because Coromandel panels are envisioned to be Coco Chanel's Coromandel panels that she brought from China, that gives us another layer of a tactile sense. You can almost feel as if you could touch those Coromandel panels in 31 Rue Cambon, in Coco Chanel's apartment, when you smell this fragrance. So it does have that power. But again, it can only be appreciated and loved if you do understand all of the facets and aspects patchouli can deliver to a fragrance. Otherwise, you cannot appreciate this one. And it's going to be tricky. I'm going to lay it down like this because I don't want it to leak. You could check out the review of the Pure Perfume, by the way, also in the link down below. Now we're getting to the final fragrance. And this one really, really takes the cake. Some of you might have guessed by now, but for those of you who haven't guessed, the name says it all, you guys. It is Patchouli Imperial by Dior. Christian Dior's Maison Dior exclusive fragrance. And this is a 40 milliliter bottle, but you could also get it in 125 ml as well as 250 ml. I think they still produce a 450 ml splash bottle as well. This one, in its pre-reformulated version, as well as in this, what I have here, reformulated version, is incredible. The reformulated version is a little bit more wearable also during the day. The pre-reformulated version is just so intense that it kind of kills everybody around you. This is, if we can really believe that there are ways of harvesting patchouli, creating patchouli, the essential oil, in a good way, right? Then this one delivers that high-class version of patchouli because it is so imperial. If I said before that Coromandel delivers, or Noble Leather even, that they both deliver a noble version of patchouli, well, this Dior here delivers the imperial version of patchouli. It is one step higher, but it is wet in the right way, not resinousy and oily, but rather moist and soft at the same time, while being very determined and precise. And that precision is exactly what the cheap patchouli oils lack, to my nose. They vibrate out of rhythm. Because to me, perfume is like music. You know, it has a vibration. It has a certain tact to it. And when it's very synthetic-y and not well balanced, it kind of vibrates all the time and it's scratchy, right? This one does not vibrate. This one flows in such harmony with itself and with everything around it, and also with the combination of the other ingredients inside of here. By the way, you could also check out the review of Patchouli Imperial. I've done this one as well on my channel. Link is in the description box down below. This one definitely delivers the best patchouli out there for my nose. And mind you, I'm a person who has fought with patchouli for a long time, and getting to know it, understand it, accept it, and even love it, it took me a while. I have smelled many more fragrances than these throughout my active research about patchouli, but these are the ones that are my favorite patchouli fragrances. And some of them are super famous, some of them are not at all. And some of them are niche, some of them are not, some of them are discontinued, some of them are still in production. So I've tried really to kind of deliver a relatively rounded selection here. But these are perfumes that I use. And I use this one a lot as well. Lately, a lot while I'm traveling too. So how do we put this nicely there? So this would be my selection. My top patchouli fragrances, my reasons why I love them, my reasons how I discovered them, a little bit of history about my past as a kid, yeah, here's another patchouli fragrance to add to the mix, Stinkor. So, yes, to many of us, patchouli stinks. To many of us. Well, I'm not one of these people anymore, but to many other people like me, it doesn't stink anymore. You just have to figure it out. You have to understand it. Just like with people, also with perfumes, you gotta give them a chance. You have to listen to them. You have to understand them before you judge them, because God knows we are so quick at judging. We are so quick at delivering a judgment, an ultimate judgment about everything without even knowing shite about it, without knowing anything about it. And yes, sometimes our opinions, as ignorant as they may be, they come out of a gut, and sometimes they are just right. You got to follow your gut instinct, but sometimes they're also wrong. And I was wrong about patchouli because I was influenced all my life to think that it was a negative thing. The connotation around it was bad, when in fact, it was far away from the truth. It's actually really good. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, please do thumb it up and let me know what you think about patchouli and what are your favorite patchouli-based fragrances in the comment section down below. For my patrons, please stay tuned because after this video, we will continue a bit longer with the secret behind the top patchouli fragrances continuation of this video. For the rest of my viewers on YouTube, thank you so much. I love you very much. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to my channel here on YouTube. I'm also on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, Super Dacob, all spelled together. And now, until next time, I say never give up on love. Love you all. See you soon. Take care. Bye.